What's up, everybody? Welcome to Overcoming Average. Thanks, guys, for coming on again. So, I wanted to kind of go back and, for those who haven't listened, obviously, we're doing the 12 Rules for Life. We're on to chapter 7 and 8. So this is our fourth get-together to talk about this. And to kind of go over, I think, the why, at least for me, I was talking to somebody today about the podcast, and the assumption was Chad's doing a podcast. It must be about technology, but that's exactly not what this is about. I mean, I've had people on that we talk about technology because that's part of me. But one thing that's part of me is I care about people. I care about you guys in particular, and I care about my friends and family. And I hope to inspire people, and I hope to have meaningful conversations that I think the stir that we're hearing on the news and stuff today is just having conversations with people. You guys tend to think the same way I do, but I like to have people on that I don't necessarily agree with, and not that I'm even trying to dig up any particular topics, but just to listen to people's point of view and hear people's stories. And I think these chapters, at least for me, have been very meaningful, which we'll get into. So I've found that every time another episode comes up, I think, oh man, these are really good chapters. We could have spent the time and probably done a whole session on one chapter, but we've kind of decided to swallow two pills at a time and do two chapters. So chapter 7 is do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. And then chapter 8 is tell the truth, or at least don't lie. And so to dive into the first one, after reviewing the book yet again to go over tonight, it's just, it's so deep. It's really hard to even start because I think you first have to address, well, what is meaning? And what is the meaning of life, which is a huge question. But I liked how Jordan Peterson started with the verse from the Quran with wisdom that basically says, well, if we know that life's going to be over, let's just eat, drink, and be merry, essentially. And let's just live it up, and who cares at the end of the day. But that's not the way the Bible teaches it. That's not a meaningful life. And I think the Bible exhibits that, especially when we're talking about Solomon, where he did all the things and he married all the women and had all the castles and the kingdoms and the money, and his life was lacking meaning. So
Ecclesiastes is like the most depressing book of the Bible. So that's you have Song of Solomon, he's a young man, youthful, full of life, lust. And then you see Proverbs, and he's older, wiser. And then Ecclesiastes, he found life is meaningless. It's very, very, very depressing. But the very last chapter of Ecclesiastes says, yes, without God, it is meaningless. And then he turns himself over to God, and then he finds meaning. So yeah, it was. He seems very clinically depressed in Ecclesiastes.
I know myself. Every time I've read Ecclesiastes, I think, "Oh, I'm never doing this again." So I'm just sad.
Yeah,
and it brings out, it's tough.
But I have to disagree with you. Jordan started the book talking about Genesis, where Adam and Eve had pain in childbirth, and Adam was cursed to toil the soil and thorns and thistles, and God said that life was going to be a struggle. So it wasn't the Quran. The Bible said that too, that life is suffering. But then he goes on that there's additional meaning, or there's got to be something else besides eat, drink, and be merry. So he then got into sacrifice and
right,
eliminating evil, stuff like that.
Well, and I think if you could sum it up, And it's like I said in the beginning, it's hard to sum up, but if you could, it's just that meaning is not found in the surface level, like fun, uh, the things that people actually pursue. And I think that goes back to the title of the chapter. It says, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. So, going out, having a good night, living it up, doing the things that people think is a good life. Those are the expedient joys that we just, you have one good night and then maybe it results in a disaster versus a meaning, something a little bit deeper, it's almost counterintuitive. Like you find meaning through the struggle and through doing the hard thing.
As your past guest, our old pastor, Bobby Conway, he said many times that if your, summum bonum, your highest priority is pleasure, then you'll be addicted to sex or drugs. You're going to be a slave to your pleasures. So while that's might be good initially, if that's your highest ideal, it'll fail you.
Yeah, it's really easy to fall into that trap, and you see people all the time who do fall into that trap. But if you look at modern marketing today, you drive down the highway or you watch a sporting event, what do they advertise? They advertise all the quick fixes, all the expedient pleasures. Go drink a beer, go watch the game with friends, and who cares about tomorrow, and all that sort of stuff. And it's just so in your face that it's hard to look past that and actually aspire for more unless you're really focused on it.
Yeah, you're so right. But I can imagine a billboard with meaning, would be pretty boring.
You can't sell meaning.
Yeah, it's that's a good point. Maybe you can sell it, because I think that's the whole point of Jordan Peterson's book is to pursue things that are meaningful, not just in this chapter, but just as a whole. Like, try to raise your kids right. Don't tell lies, as we're going to get into.
I think the sum of the whole book is this chapter. It's the main point of the whole book is this chapter, actually, I think
you're right. I mean, you look at the sum of the parts and it just boils down to, I think there's a thirst for, especially in this generation, for meaning. I think that's why we see people rioting. I think that's why we see people doing the crazy things they do. They're trying to be part of groups. They want to be a part of something that matters, and they want to feel like they've made a difference in this world or have meaning, essentially. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Rob, the billboards, it's not cut out for that. It's not a quick sell. It's not a good marketing ploy necessarily to pursue the thing that's harder for the ultimate good.
I think the part of the chapter that really struck me the most was he talked about Jesus in the wilderness, and he fasted for 40 days, and Jesus could turn water into wine. He fed 5,000 people out of, fish and bread, like a couple, he could do that. He did it, but it's just because Satan was tempting him, like, do this. He knew he would be betraying his soul for a slice of bread. So you're starving, your physical comfort, but if you're betraying your soul, it's not worth it. So, I found that if you do something against your core, it just sucks the life out of you. So finding meaning.
So, Rob, what is your take on meaning? What's something in recent weeks or months that's meaningful to you? When somebody says that, what is meaning? How do you define that?
For me, it's finding something that's more inspiring in life. Is it being a better father to my children and focusing on teaching them a life skill? Is it something personal for me? Is it, we talked about playing guitar earlier. I mean, they're collecting dust. I should be doing something to enrich my life. It could, there's a lot of things that that I lose focus on when I take the easy path and go for the instant gratification. All of those things that I focus on that I want to have meaning just kind of go to the wayside. I was talking to TJ. There was a point in time where I wanted to write a book. I think everyone goes through that phase, but these are all these grandiose things that I aspire to, and I just never take the time to do it.
So do you think that there's meaning? So it's funny, going back to the guitar thing. Do you think that that would give you more meaning to learn guitar? Because as a guitar player, I feel like that season of my life is waning a little bit. Like, I don't play professionally anymore. I play for leisure once in a blue moon. But what is it about that makes you feel like it would give you meaning? Is it just the challenge, like accepting the challenge, like the struggle through that hard thing, or what is it about specifically writing a book and playing guitar that makes you feel like you would have meaning on the other side of it?
I think it's committing to something that takes more than a week to accomplish and actually accomplishing it. And it's always been a challenge for me to do something like that. It's and it's something you can pass on. So if I can, I'm good at my job. I'm good at math. I exercise routinely, but I want something I can pass on to my kids, right? Is it a skill set? Is it a sport? And, just something that I can give to them, to give them something that might be meaningful to them. And I'm not saying sports and guitar are necessarily meaningful, but it could be something that they could have.
Pass on bridges and buildings and drainage systems.
Well, sure. Yeah. That pretty lame billboard.
No, but I think the hidden secret in what you just said is that there's the thing that gives you meaning is sort of the struggle, the thing that's not just easily picked up. And I heard something this week that made me think a little bit more about the concept of like passing something on, and it's until you are something. It's, instead of just something that you do. Like, I think like for my kids, like I want to show them this is how to live a healthy lifestyle. And it's not just doing it for a few days and like, well, look, I exercised, kids. It needs to be like, that's part of what mom and dad do is they exercise, they run, they eat healthy. That's part of who they are, which is a big challenge to take that on. And I started the podcast by saying that about me is that this is part of me. This, the worship pastor at our church mentioned that his first thought about my podcast, it was going to be technology based, but he always, he and I enjoy long, deep coffee conversations, just 2 or 3 hours. I think the first time I met with him, we were at Starbucks for 3 hours and we just talk about life and everything, just kind of hyperlinked together is what we were discussing today. But that's me, that's part of me. And I hope that this podcast and the conversations and the depth that I hope to bring is something that my kids see in me and find that meaning. Starting the podcast has not been an easy thing. I enjoy it, but just because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to hate the thing. It just has to be maybe something that's not on the surface easy to do. Took a little bit of time and research and, you guys' willingness to come out and do this and have guests that are willing to come and tell their story. So it's been a great challenge for me, but I look back and think, I'm coming up on, I think 20 released episodes, which is not a lot, but I'm super excited to get to that point and proud of that. So yeah, I think meaning comes in, conquering and overcoming something that's, like you said perfectly, it's something that's not easily done, and it's something that you can pass on and show, look at the thing I've done. So Rick, what do you think?
Oh, I hate to be a Debbie Downer.
Here we go.
But without God, everything is meaningless. The sun is going to run out of fuel and we'll be stardust in the end. So that bridge you made, Rob, is going to collapse at some point.
Hopefully not in the near future.
So apart from God, I think life is meaningless. So my meaning is be friends with people who are far away from God. And if I could help lead them to God, that'd be awesome. my job, I minister to the sick and hurting. If I was going to start a company, I'd be Abundant Life. It would be, Jesus said to come to give life and give it more abundantly, so that people could have life and enjoy life. And so my small role is that to help people enjoy their life, be able to get out of bed and go out to a restaurant and go to the family reunion and stuff like that. So, but if there's not an underlying divinity, then does it matter if I get somebody out of bed? Probably not, because we'll all be dead in the end. So,
Well, let me dissect that a little bit, because you're talking about giving these people a happy life. But, I mean, you do physical therapy, so that's not just, you don't just wave a wand and they just start walking around. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
They have to want it. They have to suffer through the therapy.
No, I completely agree that, like, I run, I like the struggle. I like to compete. I like to do all that stuff. Like I've told you guys before, whether I run a 5-minute mile or a 6:30 mile, 7-minute mile, it doesn't matter. I'm healthy. It's not going to prolong my life any, maybe a year. I don't know. But if I could get somebody who's bedbound to be able to get out and go to their high school reunion, or go out to a restaurant with family reunion, to enjoy life better, that's better. It's better if I get a 300-pound person to 200 pounds and healthy, then what's the big deal if I run a 6-minute mile or 5:50 mile? It's not a big deal.
I think you underestimate that. So the only reason I did Spartan races is because you inspired me to do it. And had you not driven me to do that by your own athleticism, I wouldn't have done it. I mean, if you were just kind of, for lack of a better word, half-assing it, I probably would have quit.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's as, what's the word I'm looking for, simplistic as it doesn't necessarily matter.
No. I agree that life is struggle, life is suffering. It's good to struggle. We talked about, what do we want for our kids? We want our kids to, if we give them everything, then they get soft. They don't work for themselves. So what's the best way to, I think you talked with one of your other guests. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm living my life through your podcast. But what's the best way to raise our kids? Is it to give them everything they want, or do they have to struggle? So no, definitely living to struggle. But if you're going to help others, what's the big deal about helping others if, everybody's going to be dead? I believe in life after death, and that there is a God and a moral order. So,
well,
I think that has to be the foundation.
Well, I think the meaning there, to go back to sort of that definition in your life, it's not easy to help people. I mean, it's honestly really hard to help people. I think it's natural for us to be selfish and to take and, I mean, I've done a lot of like favors and stuff through the company, and some of them haven't gone my way by like a long stretch. Like I give away my knowledge to people that just sort of take advantage, and it's frustrating sometimes. But then I think, well, in some regard, that's just what I need to do. I just need to help people, especially people that are in tough times. They don't have the money right now. They can't afford the expertise or whatever. So I think, just hearing Rob's story right there is good. Inspiration is not something that you can manufacture. You can't just say, you know what, I'm going to go get inspired today. It's similar to creativity in a lot of ways. Like you can't just be creative. It just has to come about, and there has to be people. And I think people are gifted with that, the ability to inspire. To hear just that small thing, I totally know what that's like. I've had people in my life that have inspired me, whether it was good or bad, somebody telling me, man, you should do that, or you're good at that, or yeah, you'll never be able to do that. And I'm like, well, I'll show you. You know, inspiration comes out of nowhere. But yeah, I think your pursuit of helping people through physical therapy and all that, I think that is that's not an easy thing to do. And I'm thankful that it's a natural thing for you, or maybe it's not so natural, but I'm glad that that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So, but to go back to talking about without God, there's no meaning. For me, the word that always pops up is there's some hope. There's hope that there's more than this life, because this life is pretty crummy sometimes. You know, if you have a good week, it doesn't seem like that, or a good day or a good hour. But to go back to the book, Jordan Peterson talks a lot about the fascinating thing is not that people do good things, it's that they don't do bad things. That everybody's not a mass murderer, that everybody's not a just complete disaster. The fascinating thing is that people withhold and they don't do that, and they do pursue meaning. That's the more, and I think that's where you find God in the details, is God is the one that inspires that and gives you the hope and pushes you to do those things, to be something better than what's your natural chaotic state.
I want to be clear. Some people say, oh, you need to believe in God to be a good person. I don't agree with that. And Jordan, even in the chapter, he breaks down, okay, I kill a mammoth. It's more food than I can eat. So maybe if I give some mammoth to that person, he'll remember that and then give me mammoth next time. So it could be completely selfish to want to share. So, you know, morality could develop, this morality could develop apart from God. So definitely morality could develop in culture. I just think beyond that, just temporary, you know, there's some things where you're not going to get caught. Like, you know, you could do terrible things and have no consequences in this life. But yet still people restrain themselves. Yeah. So I do think that imprint is on people's heart to avoid certain things. You know?
Yeah. I forget the term, but I think if I remember it right, it's the providence of God, that the world isn't spinning off into the universe just with all of us flying off into space. You know, but there's a lot of really good things that happen that shouldn't. You know, I think I can't remember which chapter he talks about this, but he talks about child abuse and how if everyone that was abused equally, everybody would be abused at this point. But the statistics show that there are people that do come out of it. And honestly, that's a real inspiration to me, because I struggle sometimes with, can people actually change? Can people come out of the hard times or the bad thing or the death of a loved one or whatever the situation is? Can they actually overcome that? And sometimes I just think, nah, everybody's destined to just be screwed and they're stuck with their vices. But to go back to something we discussed the other night off the podcast, is Paul talks about his thorn in the side that he wasn't able to get rid of. It's just that there's probably always going to be something that's a burden that we carry.
I think God wants it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, with that suffering is the meaning.
I think the main problem with society right now is that our prevailing views are Darwinism and postmodernism. Both rely on the fact that there is no God. So without God, there's no moral standard. Morality is a construct that can change. Darwinism says survival is of the fittest. If you take that to its logical end, if my race is superior than your race, I can kill you. So I want to aid evolution by getting rid of the less desirable people, less intelligent. Leads to eugenics, killing disabled people. even slavery. If I'm stronger than you, I'm better than you, I get to use my military might to oppress you. So Darwinism leads to, if that's the prevailing worldview, it leads to destruction. Postmodernism is basically there is no God, there is no truth. All that's left is power and pleasure. So to get power, you divide yourself up into groups and you oppress other groups. I think right now we see intersectionality where different groups, you have the oppressor and the oppressed, and we need to overthrow the oppressor. We don't treat people as individuals, but we see each other in groups, and it's all about power. And if there is no truth, there is no morality, then the ends justify the means. I could do whatever I want, but I'm a good person because I'm pursuing my truth, not the truth. There is no truth, but my truth. So you get to loot, you get to beat up people who disagree with you, who are quote unquote the oppressor. So we see a lot of people faking. They say they're a moral person. They're righteous in their own eyes. They're woke. Yet they do terrible things. They use this morality to justify bad stuff. So yeah, that's my thoughts on what's going on with the world is postmodernism.
Well, so to go back to World War II, we discussed this other night again when we were just hanging out. And our friend TJ was the historian, was talking about the Darwinists and the Marxists, and how basically it's just these two worldviews that seem like a right and left, because the Nazis would be considered right, communists would be considered left with Stalin and those. And like you said, when fully realized, they end in disaster. We've seen it in history in both sides, but they're very closely aligned when it comes to grouping of this group is better than that group, whether on any
the proletariat versus the business. You
Yeah.
You got
the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the Ubermen and the Untermen. It still was let's forget the individual and let's start grouping. And I agree. I think that's a dangerous fire to play with. And it's important to understand those terms. But the thing I've been trying to understand is, it seems like it's a left and right, but there's nothing in the middle. Like there's no ideology or no way of thinking that sort of center line. For me, I think I lean on the personal responsibility. You're an individual. You're responsible for your mistakes and your the things that you do well. Like I think you get benefit from it. But I think the question in people's mind with a lot of that stuff, and I know this is going on a tangent, but is how much does the outside affect you as an individual? Because we could all, you're from Chicago, I'm from North Carolina, you're from Buffalo. Like, what was it about that? Like, if you had been born in California, and your parents were, world travelers, would you have become a physical therapy doctor? Like, who knows? And how much of that had to do with your circumstance versus your individual person? Because we can't deny that circumstances, they definitely affect us. But the question is to what degree, and I don't think that degree is possible to figure out. It's just, it is an effect, but to what degree is, I think, the real question. And maybe it's a question that can't be answered.
I think the ultimate meaning, I think Christianity has the meaning and purpose. So like I said, I have a purpose. People think Christians, they want to kill gay people, or, they hate others people. Like, if I was going to kill a gay, if I think somebody's far away from God and that they're rejecting God, if I if I believe what the Bible says, I could be sending them to hell. That's the last thing I want to do. If I'm a Christian, Jesus died for sinners, and if I'm going to be like Christ, I want to help save them too. So I'm going to try to befriend them. So it doesn't make any sense. Other things like people talk about slavery, and Christians had slaves. Like the history of the world had slaves. It wasn't really until Gutenberg and the Enlightenment and the Reformation that people finally had the Bible and could read it for themselves, and they said, "Oh, man was created in the image of God. Everybody has dignity. Everybody's a child of God. Christ died for everyone. For God so loved the world that He sent His only begotten Son, that none shall perish, but have everlasting life." So if you're a real believer, you treat people as an individual, and that an individual that God loves. So you're not gonna believe in genocide, eugenics. You're not gonna kill disabled people. You want to save their souls. You want to be friends with them. So
I agree. Yeah, I think Christianity has gotten a bad rap. I don't exactly know why. I think a lot of it's just ignorance of history or the Bible in general, because the teachings of the Bible, of course there's going to be people that say that contradicts and all that stuff, but at its core, it's love people, be kind, put others first. Just the basic, the 10 Commandments is just, don't lie. We're going to get to that. Yeah. Don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't kill. Like, I don't see how any of that is something that we want bad, and the problem with some of those ideologies that we see is that they justify those bad things for the greater good of that ideology. Their God becomes the ideology of, it's okay to, at a Black Lives Matter march, beat up a black guy because he's not there for the march.
You could beat up a black cop.
Yeah, it's like, but it's like sacrificing the one guy for the greater good of the entire movement of whatever. And it just takes away the individuality, and it's all for the ideology, which again, fully filled out, fully seen, we see where that leads. So, and I know we're getting off of meaning, but I think your point with this is that those ideologies, those mindsets, without that meaning which God brings, without the religious aspect, they both lead to disaster.
I think politics could become your God, and that has disaster written all over it.
Yeah.
If you get your meaning out of who you vote for, and my group needs to is oppressed. Now I need to become the oppressor. That is not good. We see the woke mob attacking people they disagree with. So we need to be tolerant, but then we need to, hey, you don't believe what I believe, and you need to get canceled, and you lose your job. That you're getting virtue out of doing bad things. Like, objectively, wanting somebody fired and their kids not being able to eat, that's a bad thing. But you're able to justify doing a bad thing because of an ideology.
Yeah.
Well, it's a mob mentality. So these people have enough backing through the media and social media that there's no consequence right now. And I still can't get over the fact that there's no consequence for these riots. These people are running roughshod over Seattle and Portland, and no one's stopping them. So what's the perception out there then, that it's okay to be righteous for things that are predominantly, evil is a strong word, but they're breaking the law in the name of this virtuosity and righteousness that is based in...
You're blinding police officers. You're shooting lasers in their eye, blinding them permanently, and you think you're a good person.
They're celebrating it.
Yeah, that's not virtuous.
Yeah, and again, it's difficult to have conversations with people that you don't agree with because I feel like on both sides, there's a lot of folks that just, they just, in the cancel culture world, would just shut you off. I don't want to hear what you have to say because you're not on the same page as me. So therefore you're evil, you're bad. I like to listen to other people and hear what they say because I'm convinced that every human being is going to disagree on something. I mean, there's going to be something there, whether Rick doesn't like coffee, I disagree with that, but
Canceled.
yeah, you're canceled, coffee canceled. But yeah, I mean, I welcome that. And I think that that's a very good thing to have because conversations with individuals spur thought. And, when someone's sitting straight across from you and you're talking and you hear that, wow, they've experienced things that I don't understand, like it's hard to deny unless they're just lying. But a lot of times people, they will tell you, hey, this is the way I grew up. This is the things that I saw on both sides. I mean, there's people that right now they've come from, Western Europe or Eastern Europe and said, you don't want this. We've lived that. It was a war and we all came over here because of that. Like our parents were refugees and we came over here to get away from that thing that you're pursuing. So, everybody's got an experience, but so tell the truth or at least don't lie. Chapter 8. So thoughts on that chapter? You laugh.
I don't know where to begin. There's so much.
Yeah. So the first thing is if your wife says, do I look fat in this dress? Yeah, that's, that's the classic. Do you tell the truth or at least just don't lie?
So I'm a pretty opinionated guy and my wife says, why don't you keep your opinions to yourself? I'm like, oh yeah, I should.
That doesn't sound like Melissa, by the way.
That doesn't. Okay. So to answer her, I never really fully articulate my answer, but in Douglas Murray in the Madness of Crowds, great book. He talks about people in like the Soviet Union, or I can't remember if it was a different communist country, but they would be forced to say things that they knew were not to be true. Like, we've been at war, peace. We're at war, and then war is peace, peace is war. They would say like the chocolate ration has gone up, even though they knew it went down. Like they got less chocolate than the week before, and they would say, "Oh, chocolate production is up." So things they knew that weren't true. He said, "There's nothing more soul sucking, more demeaning than saying something that you know isn't true." So it's just like, just robs your soul. Just like betraying your for your soul for a piece of bread, like saying something that's just not true, just sucks your soul. 1984, the classic is like 2 + 2 = 5. And then I used to love Star Trek, the Next Generation, and one episode they had Captain Jean-Luc Picard, and he was being tortured, and all he had to say, well, how many lights do you see? And there were like 3 lights, and he had to say like 4 or something like that. And just so once you say a lie that you know is false, they got you. It just robs your soul. So, okay. Jordan, in the start of the chapter, he talks about, he goes to a mental hospital, and there's a woman there, and she's a patient, and there's a group of 10 people who are the students, and she goes up and, hey, could I join your group, or could I what are you guys doing? And he was then said he needed to say like, no, we're students and we're examining people, or you can't hang out with us. And he was like, oh, it was hard to say, like, should I lie to this woman? And it was a rough thing to say. Me, in my own life, as a physical therapist, it was the weirdest thing. I came across people with fibromyalgia, and I'm like, hey, I'm good. I fix this people, and boom, 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 things are working like I planned. People are getting better. Then I just noticed fibromyalgia. I didn't really understood it when I was a student. Once I came into practice, it's like, whoa, this is a big thing. So fibromyalgia is that it's kind of a lot of undiagnosed pain. So they say, oh, you got pain here, pain there, pain there. So, okay, it's general. 99% of these people have depression and they have anxiety and they don't sleep. So it's possibly thought that maybe they're not sleeping well, so they don't go through the deepest stage of REM sleep to repair their muscles. It's kind of the maybe going theory. But it's also that fibromyalgia, if you could have a physical manifestation of pain, but it could be coming from depression, anxiety. So when I come across a patient who things aren't fitting right, things aren't progressing, I always have to have a tough talk, and I say, okay, depression, is a big thing, lack of sleep. So you need to make sure, you have fibromyalgia, you need to make sure you get enough sleep. And are you seeing a psychologist? Do you have anxiety, depression issues? Because I'm not saying that you don't have anything going on physically. I'm saying your mental status can make things a lot worse.
Interesting.
So I would go through this anxiety. If I don't address the psychological, the mind, I'm not doing my job as a physical therapist. So it's a lot easier for me to just say, okay, you're not getting better. Okay, you're discharged. If I don't bring this up, if I don't say, hey, there's something going on here, I would be wrong. I say all this in preface for the next point, which is transgenderism. It is something in your mind. If it's not addressed, there's major consequences. There's 40% of people commit suicide or attempt suicide. There's significant links between like autism and transgenderism. So depression, suicide. So it may be that they don't feel accepted and they're more likely to commit suicide. I think like the suicide rate in Nazi Germany was like 6%. So people really, really, really oppressed would commit suicide like 6%. Yet transgenders would commit suicide at 40%. So I don't...
Is it really 40%?
Would attempt suicide.
Attempted to. That's super high.
And that's before surgery and after surgery, the rates are the same. So if we don't address if there is psychological issues, we're actually doing disservice. So now we can't say the truth. We can't say maybe there's something going on in your mind that needs to be addressed. If you just say go on and do whatever you want, okay, you are now a man. You are actually probably doing more harm because you're letting them continue down a path which is destructive. They need to probably be seeing a psychiatrist, doing all this stuff. And there's laws now that say you can only be gender affirming. You can't. That is like me saying, yep, your back pain, your neck pain, all this pain. Yeah, that's what it is. We can't. It's forbidding me from saying, hey, we should maybe think about your mind.
Yeah.
So for society, for me saying this, it is transphobic or whatnot. That's like me saying that I hate my patients who have fibromyalgia and that I want them to suffer, and that is completely not true. If somebody has cancer and I say, oh, it's not what you think, you hate me. You want me to die because I have cancer. That's ridiculous. If you really care about people, you want them to seek help. For me, saying a man can be a woman is the same as 2 + 2 = 5. I don't believe it's true. I don't hate anybody. I want them to get help. But now we're not allowed to say that. So
yeah, I see. That was a good point. In the sort of speaking truth aspect of it, but especially I feel like it's gotten to where, I mean, it literally is satire. I told you guys the joke the other day about the Babylon Bee said, motorcyclist wins Tour de France by identifying as a bicyclist.
yeah,
It's literally satire, because it's not just, at least from my estimation of what I see the world, it's not just, I feel one way or the other. It's like, it's taking these extreme, like people feel like parakeets and they feel like animals and all variants of, genders and in between. And it just seems like people want to just make things up to feel.
people have identified as blindness, and they've poured acid in their eyes, causing themselves to be blind. We shouldn't affirm that. We should get them psychological help.
Right.
To say that, we don't hate people for saying that. I think it's just the way our society goes. In the Douglas Murray book, it takes like the for the LGBT or for the lesbian gay thing movement, they did the strategy of they were born that way. And okay, we don't hate you. We can't blame you for something that you're born with. For transgenderism, they didn't do you're born that way, because hermaphrodite would be you're obviously born that way. Empirically, anatomically, we could see that. But the transgender movement hasn't done that. They said, you must accept a man changing in front of your daughter. You must accept Fallon Fox breaking the skull of a woman in mixed martial arts. You need to applaud a guy breaking the skull of a woman. And we're supposed to say, yes, that is awesome. I applaud that. That is great. So in the book, The Madness of Crowds, he says it's more about a bludgeon. It's this 2 + 2 = 5. I dare you to say otherwise, that it's not, or we're going to come after you. So if it's about rights, if it's about transgender or hermaphrodites being accepted, I'm all for it. But I think it's become a bludgeon. You must agree with this or else.
Yeah.
So that suicide rate is a staggering number. And it tells me that whatever path they're going down, they're not solving the problem. And to eliminate the possibility of, going to see a psychiatrist and trying to get to the root of a problem, if that's truly what's causing it, is a huge disservice to the people who need that to feel better about themselves.
They're calling it conversion therapy. If you're trying to say, no, you are the sex you were born with, you're trying to deconvert them away from transgenderism. So they're trying to make, a lot of states have said that's illegal. You can only be gender affirming of what they choose.
But that's two black and white options. But why can't you just have a conversation and walk through it? And maybe at the end of all of your sessions, you decide that, you know what, maybe this is the best path forward for them.
That would be between a person and their doctor, but now a doctor is not able to say that.
Right, and I think that's a very bad thing for the people who could feel better about themselves by going down that avenue.
Yeah, that's why I think it's about force. It's about about dictating. You must comply, which it's the 2 + 2 = 5. You're not at liberty to express your opinion. There's just a poll out that said 62% of people are afraid to express their opinion.
Yeah.
So almost 2/3 of the population can't say what they think. How are we the land of the free when you can't say what you think? You're not free to have a thought.
Yeah.
In Jordan Peterson's classic interview with Kathy Newman, he says, you feel free to question me. You feel free to offend me. That's uncomfortable. Why should you have the right to do that? And then she's like,
Yeah.
we need to be able to have dialogue, have conversations, and say, is this the best path for you? Should we encourage kids to go down a road that ends in 40% suicide or 40% attempted suicide? That's not something we should encourage. We should discourage that. And, I do not know for certain. I could be open. Bruce Jenner or Caitlyn Jenner, he's a Kardashian, so he may, I don't know about his mental sanity. So being a Kardashian.
Well, and I think it seems like a joke to talk about 2 + 2 = 5. And that's an exaggeration, but I feel like numbers, and we've talked about this off the record a lot. Numbers are really hard to accept, because it's like, well, where did this stat come from? And we're living in the days of the coronavirus right now, where it's like 1 minute it's going to be 2 million Americans dead, and I think right now we're at 0.2% of the population has died of the coronavirus in how many ever months since the beginning of the year. It's hard, but still people are locked in their homes, afraid to go out, wearing masks, the whole 9 yards. So I feel like any topic, if you say that number, 40%, of course, I've heard that statistic before, and I think, wow, that's incredible. Every time I hear it, I think that's crazy that people group would attempt suicide at that high of rate, and no one's paying attention to that. And going the next mile and saying, why is that? And let's find out why. Because maybe it is just because they're uncomfortable to say, why do you feel that you're transgender? Were you born that way? Do you feel that way? Why do you feel that way? And ask the questions. I don't know. I'm sure there are people that do, but.
So there's been like rapid onset gender dysphoria. So where one person, it used to be mostly men wanting to become women, but now it's mostly females wanting to become men. And they think it's, these would be the same people who be like cutters, like high anxiety people. But one person in a group will get it, and then several other people will get it. So it seems to be in clusters. It's like you're infected, one person isn't. It doesn't seem to be that you were born that way, but it's like social pressure.
Well, and obviously this doesn't spread like a disease, but I could see the ideas being in groups and in around scenarios where it is more accepted and celebrated.
Yeah.
To where it makes it easier, or maybe not even, I've heard people say that, they're brave, like Caitlyn Jenner. That was the whole thing, is he was brave for coming out and saying, oh, I'm a woman now, you call me she. And then there's the Ben Shapiro thing where he talks about how is that brave when he's celebrated and
when he gets Woman of the Year.
Yeah, he's winning awards. It's like, how's that brave? But defending your country and dying, we don't want to,
I'm just afraid if we encourage it, as soon as you go on hormones, a female, you're going to be infertile. You're killing your ovaries. You may not reproduce. you become infertile. I'm afraid there's going to be lawsuits in like 15 years, 10 years, where these teenage girls all of a sudden want to kind of grow out of this and want to have kids, and they can't. So just encouraging infertility and encouraging possible suicide is
Yeah. It's scary when you say it that way. It's, yeah.
but I guess I'm a hater because I really want the best for everybody. Like I said in the last chapter, if people are lost, I want them to be found. I don't,
And I think that comes from conversation. Anybody that knows you would know Rick doesn't want anything bad for you, So, yeah, hopefully that comes across because, same way. When you see somebody flashing a billboard, burning a building down or whatever, you don't really know who they are. You don't know their intentions. We live in a snippet culture, the billboard culture, where we just see the coolest part, the part that sticks out is the most shocking. But we don't know the true person behind the thing. So, Rob, what do you think?
A few thoughts. So the kind of the cluster comment that you made, I find that I'm assuming that people who are depressed tend to gravitate towards other people who are depressed, particularly in maybe a college setting, right? So you kind of get that group of people who are, we're going to stay in all weekend and we're going to sit around and watch Gilmore Girls. I'm not picking on Gilmore Girls, but we're going to sit around and marathon a TV show. And they start to get very like-minded because they're spending a lot of time together in a depressed setting. And, person A might see their friend decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to become transgender and that's going to make me happy. And they might see that instant spark of happiness that may or may not dwindle with time, but it'll spark in their head. Hey, maybe I'm that person too.
I think you see it with bulimia and anorexia. I forgot who I was listening to, but they said that they would have to keep teenage girls apart who are bulimic because they'll encourage each other. So it seems to have an amplifying effect, which would go against the born that way thing.
Well, I think a lot of this stuff is, to me, on the outside, it just screams that I'm not happy with who I am. So I want to transform into someone totally different. I want to be somebody else. And then maybe that person that I don't like or that had a bad experience when I was a child or whatever will disappear and I can be someone new. And maybe that's why it's so freeing to a lot of people is that they feel like they're shedding their skin and becoming somebody new, which is not addressing the real issue.
I didn't want this thing to be all transgender. It's just, for me, it's so, for me to be silent, it just sucks my soul. Like what my wife says, why don't you just be quiet? It's like, I think the world's going crazy. I think women are becoming infertile. We're encouraging people to do 40% suicide after they mutilate their bodies. The world's going crazy. I need to say something. Stop. I didn't want this to be like just transgenderism. I think Jordan talks about a lot deeper stuff, like you're betraying yourself. If like a kid doesn't get their way, you think your kid's the best baseball player, then when they get out in the real world and go on a team and they suck, then they're gonna be angry. They're gonna despise the world. That if kids get everything they want, the world's gonna hit them in the face, and then we're not being truthful with our kids. So there's a lot deeper things. I don't want that. I'm just picking on transgender. It's just, for me, it just sticks out that, bam, this is just.
Well, I appreciate you telling the truth. And how you feel too, because I haven't thought about it that way. I think that I agree. I think a lot of people, to go back to the chapter title, are lying to themselves. Maybe even they're not even telling the truth to themselves. They're trying to come up with a new reality. And then this goes into another chapter when he talks about choosing your words wisely. I can't remember the name of the chapter exactly, but yeah, answering those questions when people ask you, I think it's good to be honest with people and tell them the truth.
So for me to say that I don't believe that a man can become a woman, for me to say that, I had to preface it by saying like 5 different points. I had to talk about Douglas Murray, 1984. I had to talk about Jordan Peterson in a psych ward. I had to talk about fibromyalgia, how it's similar, where I would be doing a disservice to somebody if they had fibromyalgia. I didn't say you need to talk to a psychologist. Your physical pain could be manifested by something mental. I had to go through all that to then say what I believe.
Sure.
That's crazy. That's the society where we're in, where you need to prove where you don't have hatred in your heart that for you to be able to say what you think. So it's such eggshells that I have to like give a 10-minute rundown for what I want to say.
Well, and I think that that's good, and I appreciate that you back it up too. You come with an explanation, because a lot of people, I feel like they throw things out and they have a belief and they don't really even know why. It's just they're a parrot of something that they've heard already. They haven't thought about it. They haven't had deeper conversation. Because I've known several people with fibromyalgia, and it's just this unsolvable thing. But truth be told, behind the scenes, you think, man, they probably need to go talk to somebody about some issues, because it's very apparent that there's other issues in their life, at least the folks that I knew.
For anybody like I said, there may be something, but
sure.
I believe it's amplified by your mental status and possibly lack of sleep.
Well, and mental health, I think we're so far behind on mental health in the world. Hopefully we're getting better at it, but I feel like depression, anxiety, those are just the things that we know about, and we're throwing medicine at it for some people that I don't know if we really know. I mean, you're a doctor, so you may know more than I do, but I feel like we just don't know a lot. So it's hard to say.
My other thought is that I think like last week, my company said, you need to be just a general, not just me, but you need to be careful what you say on social media, this and that. You can't like make our company look bad. So I don't have our company's name or whatever, and my account's private, but I'm like, I'm not going to live that way. If I'm going to be free, I'm going to be able to express my mind. We need to have dialogue. I just can't live that way. I just can't be quiet, and I can't just say, okay, 2 + 2 = 5. I'm okay with that.
I think it's fair to say that, but I think it's also fair to accept the consequences for what you say. And I think that drives home Melissa's point is, we can certainly talk about this on, Wednesday nights, but you do have to be careful. And I'm generally pretty careful. Like at work, I don't talk about politics or anything along those lines, because it's easier for me just to sit back and listen. And I got the voice in my head saying what it wants to say, but nobody really cares what I think. It's only going to be negative.
Well, and that's a very good point. And there are places to have those conversations. I know I've had difficult conversations in the workplace before, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily inappropriate if you're having lunch and you have a talk about something, but it can make it awkward if you don't have the time or the position to speak to somebody about something and have an actual conversation like we're having, or those conversations, I would say, are generally going to be a little more heated, maybe more tough to kind of get to the bottom of an issue. Why do you feel that way? I mean, I've had conversations with friends and neighbors that we disagree, and it's 2 or 3 hours of hashing it out, and you walk away, maybe you've taken one step forward in the whole process, and maybe you think, that was one good point out of maybe 50 or 100. So yeah, you do have to get your job done. You do have to maintain friendships and stuff. But
the problem I have is that there's one side that'll go that's politically acceptable. So 4 or 5 years ago, Colin Kaepernick kneeled for the national anthem, And, you know, a lot of people didn't like it. Most people said he's free to do it. We don't like it, but that's fine. Now they just had the basketball startup, and there was one person who stood for the national anthem.
It's like everything's flipped.
He had so our society has changed in 4 years, and now he had to explain why he stood for the national anthem. So our society is going one way, and I think it's because people of the conservative bent are afraid to speak their minds, that only one side can express their views. You know, I think America is great. I think it's done some bad things, but all in all, I think it's been a force for good in the world. We killed Nazis, you know, 800,000 people died freeing slaves. We've set other countries free. You look at North Korea and South Korea. South Korea, we buy their cars, and they're rich. I think they're richer per capita than we are. And North Korea, who we don't do business with, they're dying in starvation camps. And
Yeah.
so America, I think, is good. Like, but it's politically correct to say America's evil. You know, the flag is a symbol of oppression. So I think people need to just speak their mind, and I'm not gonna be one to just say, okay, you know, I'm not gonna watch our country collapse.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna tell the truth.
Yeah. Well, and don't get me wrong. I don't think that I would say, and I don't think Rob's saying it either, is that you need to lie about it. Because going back to the book, it's tell the truth or at least don't lie.
I think the at least part is it's a less optimal. You should tell the truth, but
Sure.
it's like a B- if you at least don't lie.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and
it's
I would
okay.
encourage, because we've talked about this before in jest, things like Facebook posts and stuff generally don't, they just find people that agree and say, oh, I agree with that as well. I've never met anybody who said, you know what, I changed my mind because I saw a Facebook post or whatever. I think conversation is probably the best opportunity.
Yeah.
Because at least in today's world, I feel like people in politics, at least, they listen to the news outlets in whichever bias, and they just soak up that whatever. And that's the knowledge that they get. It's the numbers, it's the ideology, it's the narrative. And that's all they know is to regurgitate it. And then when challenged by anybody of the opposite side on either side, it gets awkward because they don't really know anything other than what they've heard. And it's tough. It's a really tough thing. I mean, I heard on the Colin Kaepernick thing, Joe Rogan had Ben Shapiro on, and they talked about Colin Kaepernick. And I listened to the whole thing. And if you listen to the whole thing, Shapiro talks about how Colin Kaepernick came out with a certain standard, and this is why I kneeled. And Rogan kind of pushed back and said, well, what's wrong with kneeling? Isn't that like a sign of respect? And I saw someone who had debated, I think it was the Young Turks or whatever, posted and said they had a snippet of Ben Shapiro like getting owned on the podcast. But they took the part when Ben Shapiro said, well, Colin Kaepernick came out and said this, and they play the video, and it's Colin Kaepernick kind of saying the opposite.
Yeah.
But if you listen to the whole thing, it's like, well, he said that, and then he backtracked, and Colin Kaepernick later said, well, this is what it was. And so it actually affirmed. But going back to the news and what we ingest and what we listen to, you see that and you think, Ben Shapiro, they got him. But they didn't actually get him. If you listen to the whole thing, Ben Shapiro was right. But there was a video that was wrong for the moment and then became right when Colin Kaepernick changed his mind. And so it's just unfortunate that we don't have time. If you've got a job and you're trying to live life and, you know, spend time with your kids, you can't investigate every issue. And it's unfortunate because we see that article and you think, oh man, that's, and so some people have a view of Ben Shapiro and see that and say, well, he's an idiot. He got owned by Joe Rogan, which was a terrible caption, a terrible video, and the most out of context snippet you could have picked.
Well, it's because journalism's dead. So, when I grew up, you had 3 channels to watch the news. Well, 4: ABC, NBC, CBS, and WGN. But they reported the news. You didn't really have to parse out what you thought had left-wing spin and right-wing spin. It was just the news, and you could formulate your own opinion based on the facts. You don't even know what the facts are anymore, and that was a perfect example that you just gave, and I see it all the time on Facebook. You can make any argument you want.
Yeah.
On, someone could take this podcast and somehow make us all seem like left-wing people.
Yeah, of course.
They could just dice it up and be like, well, he said that, so he's clearly a Democrat.
Yeah. Well, and if you listen to both sides, if you listen to Fox, you listen to CNN, it sounds to me like exactly the same stuff, but with names replaced. Yeah. I mean, it's literally like people say they don't listen to us and they don't look at the facts. They don't read the science, and they both say the same thing. And that's when you've been bamboozled, whenever they're both saying the same thing and just replacing names. It's super scary. So I hope that through conversations like this and the conversations that I tend to have on a regular basis with friends and people out in the world are a little bit more in depth. Like, let's find out, let's investigate. Why do you feel that way? Because I've changed my mind on things. And that's another thing, going back to cancel culture. We kind of joked, and Rick kept saying he was going to get canceled after this episode for telling the truth.
I'm independently wealthy, so I don't get canceled.
Right. So, it's with cancel culture, people forget that you can adapt. You can change your mind on things. I mean, I think that we would all probably have differing opinions if some science came out or some studies came out and said, oh, actually, the suicide rates have changed. Now it's, white guys that do podcasts are 40% more likely to, So yeah, people can change their minds. Joe Rogan was talking about this, I think maybe with, I forget who it was, Ben Shapiro, but they were talking about, things that I thought 5, 10, 20 years ago are not the same things that I think now. Some things have been solidified, and some things I've opened up on and thought, well, that's actually a good point. I forget who said it, but it's a classic saying that 5 years from now, you'll be the same person except for the books that you've read and the people that you've met. And that is so true. The people that you meet really, really change your life on how you look at the world because of your experiences and the experiences that you can see through their eyes. And then, of course, the books you read. So again, I think diversity in books, I tend to read a lot of nonfiction books, whether it's business or self-help or religion or history. But I do sometimes go to fiction and I read the classics. I went through a phase of reading classics, and so the books that you read and the people that you meet. So there's a lot of stuff to ingest as far as data other than the news that's biased. You can read a book that was typically a book on a subject is going to be an in-depth study, and it's going to kind of give you the whole narrative. So I, for one, would encourage some of that, especially with the history stuff. At least now I find that interesting. I didn't find it interesting when I was a kid.
I'm trying to think what we need to follow science, and if science says something, I'm trying to think what scientific papers have been canceled because they disagree with political correctness. I can't think of the example, but how are we gonna progress as a society if we're gonna be stuck on this one point? We're actually doing harm to somebody because we're not listening to science. Right. We're lying to ourselves. So, well, I wish I had the example.
Well, it's been debunked already with this. I can't recall the author's name, but he was writing intentionally fake papers about how dogs peeing in the park
patriarchy
were, affirming the patriarchy, and it was like winning awards, and it was totally fake.
I saw that one.
So the fact that can happen, and it wasn't just one paper, it was like multiple papers were winning awards, and it was totally fake. It just tells you that this stuff's bogus. It's not based in reality. It's totally fake. And people can make up fake science, essentially. It's hard to know what to believe.
I got some more lies that were
Let's hear 'em.
being told. And this is the liberal point of view that I've heard at least one point in my life, that gender is a social construct, but you need to have surgery to change your gender. So if it's a social construct, why do you need to change your gender? Skin color is insignificant, but now skin color is the most important thing. It's your identity. It's men and women are equal, yet women are better. They're more compassionate. They're more responsible. So are they better? Or are they equal? Are men better at this or that? Are they equal? So you can change your gender, but you cannot change your race. So one part of your DNA you can change, but one part of your race you can't. And I get what people say, that gender is not sex, but there's a 99% correlation. So you are born this way, gay, when you're talking about gay people, but then you can be gender fluid, which you could choose. So one part of your sexuality you're fixed, and another part of your sexuality it's fused. My mind can't handle these contradictions, and this gets past postmodernism. It's not about truth, because these are mutual contradicting statements. But it's about truth. It's about power, that some people will use whichever axiom at one point to prove their point, or to get power. So I think you need to treat people as an individual. I think the context of your character is more important than the color of your skin. You need to look at somebody's character. You need to see somebody's soul, not just their genitalia. You need to see them as a person, not their sexual identity. You're not supposed to hit a woman, yet you need to cheer when a woman's skull gets fractured by a 32-year-old woman who up till she was 30 was a man and broke her skull. That's good, we need to say, but you're not supposed to hit a woman. My brain can't handle it. We're being told lies. Yeah. Anyways, more cancellation for me.
Well, I appreciate your wisdom and thoughts again, because it makes me think about it more in depth, and solidify. Hopefully, somebody that would listen would say, "Oh, I've never thought about it that way." But again, I think at the end of this, I would just encourage conversations, and if any of those people are listening, I mean, we've actually tried to encourage people to come and join with us who have differing opinions, and they typically can't make it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's because they're actually busy or if they just don't want to. They don't want to have the conversation. But
I think podcasts intimidate people.
That's true. Well, that's definitely, as you guys know, not the case. It's pretty easy to do and just have good conversations. For me, it makes me think. I definitely self-evaluate. I've realized sometimes I just babble on, and my guests are way more interesting than I am most of the time. So, but yeah, thanks guys for coming on. I look forward to the next chapters. I don't know what they are, but
to be continued.
To be continued. So thanks for coming on, guys.
You got it, bud.